the I Take History with My Coffee podcast, where we explore history in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. Isabel to Fernando, May 1486. The dead weigh on me heavily, but they could not have gone better employed. On the night of January 1st, 1492, Christian troops quietly entered the Alhambra palace complex under cover of darkness. By dawn, the banners of Castile and Aragon flew from Granada's towers, and heralds announced the conquest of the last Muslim kingdom in Iberia. Official chroniclers would record this as an unimposed entry, a divinely ordained conclusion to Spain's centuries-long reconquest. The truth was far more complicated. The city had fallen through secret negotiations and internal betrayal, not the military skill celebrated in royal propaganda. Yet this manufactured victory marked the culmination of a decade-long campaign that had bolstered Spain's military strength and laid the groundwork for its imperial future. The conquest of Granada in 1482 through 1492 is at the heart of a key debate in military history. Was it a turning point where Spain pioneered modern warfare, forming Europe's first professional standing army, transforming siege tactics with systematic artillery, and creating organizational structures that would lead European battlefields for over a century? Or was it simply the last chapter of medieval warfare, using traditional methods on a larger scale? In December 1481, the aging emir Abu al-Hassan launched a surprise attack on the Christian frontier town of Zahara. He saw it as a local reprisal, the latest in centuries of border skirmishes. He failed to realize that the Christian kingdoms had undergone fundamental changes. Isabel of Castile and Fernando of Aragon had united their realms and strengthened royal authority. They would not respond with a punitive raid, but pursue total conquest. Granada's vulnerability was more profound than its aging emir realized. Decades of civil war had torn the kingdom apart. Clan loyalties took precedence over loyalty to the central government. Abu al-Hassan's favoritism toward a Christian captive, Isabel de Solis, over his first wife, Fatima, sparked a bitter succession crisis. When Christian forces captured the strategic fortress of Alhambra in February 1482, Fatima's supporters used the disaster to install her son, Abdil, as a rival emir. Now Granada faced an external siege while also falling apart internally. The seizure of Alhambra itself revealed patterns that would shape the entire war. Local Andalusian nobles, especially the Marquis of Cadiz, initiated the operation independently. Isabel and Fernando had not ordered the attack, yet they quickly claimed credit for it, weaving it into a story of a royal crusade against Islam. This gap between official propaganda and actual reality persisted throughout the conquest. Royal chroniclers, such as Hernando de Palgar, portrayed the war as being solely directed by the monarch's strategic vision and divine intervention. Modern historians, following J.N. Hilgarth's research, have uncovered extensive falsifications in these accounts. The true story involved much more Andalusian initiative, military setbacks, and improvisation than the sanitized royal chroniclers acknowledged. The early years of the war taught tough lessons. Fernando's attempt to take Loja in 1482 ended in a humiliating defeat. A lesson to him, as one chronicler dryly noted. The Christian commanders were inexperienced, and their forces were poorly coordinated. Granada still managed to put up strong resistance. Abu el Hassan gathered 3,000 cavalry and 50,000 infantry to lay siege to Alhambra, showing that the emirate still had strength despite its political division. The Al-Hakia disaster of March 1483 was even more devastating. A Christian raiding force got trapped in mountainous terrain near Maluga. Between 800 and 2,000 soldiers were killed or captured, and the Marquis of Cadiz barely escaped under the cover of darkness. Some saw his departure as wise preservation of essential military leadership. Others viewed it as abandoning his troops. The ambiguity reflected broader questions about how to fight this new kind of war. The turning point arrived in April 1483 when Abdil was captured at the Battle of Lucena. Fernando faced a decision to imprison the rival emir and continue the straightforward conquest, or to release him and prolong the civil war in Granada. He chose division. In exchange for his freedom, Abdil became a Spanish vassal, accepting a 2-year truce and agreeing to fight against his own father and uncle with Spanish support. Although Abdil proved to be an unreliable ally, his occasional dependence on Fernando's backing allowed the Christians to maintain intelligence networks within Granada. It prevented the Muslims from uniting against their common enemy. Military innovation gradually developed from these early campaigns. Although artillery had existed before Granada, it was here that it saw its most systematic use. At Elora in June 1484, Lombard cannons destroyed gate towers and pierced walls, quote, heretofore considered impregnable, end quote, within 9 days, unleashing, quote, such firepower as had never before been seen, end quote. The town was leveled, and the defenders were terrified into surrender. When refugees reached Maluga, the residents dismissed them as cowards. They could not believe walls could fall so quickly. Neighboring towns began surrendering rather than face similar bombardments. Yet, technology alone could not win wars. An attempt on Loja in January 1485 failed, despite the use of improved artillery, demonstrating that guns required proper logistics, a robust supply infrastructure, and capable command. The Marquis of Cadiz's tactical skill remained vital. His intelligence network identified chances, and his leadership secured water supplies during sieges. The revolution was in combining new technology with organized systems. By 1485, the Christians had developed a highly effective method. They significantly increased their artillery capacity. French and Breton engineers shared advanced technical knowledge, and new weapons, such as fireballs, made their combat debut at Ronda. The fortress fell in 14 days despite strong defenses. Feliz Maluga surrendered in 11 days. Fortified towns that once could have held out for months now fell in weeks. The infrastructure supporting these operations proved just as crucial as the guns. Fernando employed 6,000 workers to build roads for artillery transport through mountain terrain. These roads remained visible in Spanish networks for centuries afterward. The Master of Artillery position, established in 1482, was responsible for moving, positioning, and supplying the guns. By 1489, this had become a permanent role, establishing artillery as a professional military branch. The Siege of Maluga in 1487 tested whether this system could overcome determined resistance. The city held out for months. At a crucial moment when Christian forces wavered, Isabel personally appeared in the besieging camp, signaling unbreakable royal commitment. Maluga finally surrendered. The entire population was enslaved, presented by chronicler Pulgar as clemency, compared to demands for a general massacre. Artillery made fortifications vulnerable. However, transforming this into a territorial conquest required Isabel's administrative genius. Her logistics ensured a continuous supply. Her financial innovations, facilitated through papal crusade indulgences, provided unprecedented resources. Her strategic leadership coordinated military actions with diplomatic efforts to exploit Granada's divisions and employed naval blockades to prevent North African reinforcements. By 1489, Granada's western territories had fallen. The siege of Baza that year was the most formidable challenge yet. The fortress stubbornly held out, and the Christian army began to show signs of wanting to abandon the campaign. Once more, Isabel personally appeared to stop the retreat. Her presence, along with relentless bombardment and an economic blockade, finally forced the surrender. The construction of Santa Fe in 1491, during the Siege of Granada, sent a clear message. Instead of a temporary tented camp, the Christians built a permanent fortified settlement. They intended to stay as long as necessary. Granada, isolated from the coast, cut off from external aid, and facing food shortages during the winter of 1490-91, could no longer resist. City elders argued that they should negotiate while Christian armies were dispersed for winter. Waiting would only worsen the terms. Yet Nazareth leaders feared a popular uprising if they negotiated openly. The solution involved secret betrayal disguised as military conquest. But Abdil negotiated a surrender agreement with Fernando, hidden behind public capitulation documents. On the night of January 1st, 1492, Christian forces were secretly brought into Alhambra. By dawn, the conquest was complete. The official story left out the nighttime infiltration, instead claiming an unopposed entry guided by divine will. The heralds cry that the monarchs, quote, have won the city of Granada and its whole kingdom by force of arms from the infidel Moors, end quote, was technically false. However, the fabricated victory served its purpose, announcing the end of a monarchical crusade believed to be blessed by divine intervention. The 1492 surrender terms seemed surprisingly generous. Granada's Muslims would have religious freedom, property rights, and be governed by traditional Islamic law. These provisions reflected Fernando's pragmatic view that harsh treatment could destabilize the region and potentially lead to North African intervention. Archbishop Hernando de Talavera represented the possibility of genuine coexistence. He learned Arabic, respected Moorish culture, and aimed for conversion through gentle persuasion rather than force. We must adopt their works of charity, and they our faith, he explained. His instructions for Muslim converts focused on gradual cultural adaptation. changes in dress, customs, and language, without coercion. When Western music did not appeal to Muslims, he replaced church organs with their own musical instruments. This psychological sensitivity, along with his obvious goodness, made Muslims love him as a true father, as one contemporary noted. Talavera carefully kept the Inquisition out of Granada and honored the 1491 agreements. In 1497, when Portugal expelled its Muslim population en masse, Isabel and Fernando let them settle in Spain. The dedication to tolerance appeared genuine. But darker patterns were emerging. The path toward forced conversion was established with Spain's Jewish population. The Inquisition was founded between 1478 and 1480, targeting Jewish converts suspected of secretly practicing Judaism. As we discussed in the last episode, these conversos, or new Christians, faced constant surveillance and persecution. When the severity of the situation became clear, expulsion replaced surveillance. In 1492, the same year Granada fell, Isabel and Fernando ordered all practicing Jews to convert or leave Spain. The pattern would repeat with Muslims. In 1499, Archbishop Francisco Jimenez de Cisneros arrived in Granada. Impatient with Talavera's gradual methods, Cisneros launched forced baptism campaigns. He began by forcibly reconciling Christians who had converted to Islam, a direct breach of the 1491 capitulations that guaranteed religious freedom. The Albaycin district erupted in revolt in December 1499. Cisneros claimed victory. Within days, over 3,000 Muslims had been baptized. When the revolt spread to rural populations in the mountains, Fernando crushed the uprising and offered survivors a choice: conversion or immigration. On February 3rd, 1500, Cisneros wrote that he, quote, preferred that they should convert and be slaves, end quote. A pragmatic order in February 1502 mandated the expulsion of all unconverted adult Muslims from Castile. However, immigration was nearly impossible. All children under 15 had to stay behind. So most Muslims remained as nominal Christians, also known as Moriscos. The parallels with the Jewish experience were striking. Both conversos and Moriscos lived under constant suspicion of secretly adhering to their ancestral faiths. Both practiced forbidden rites in secret, resenting broken promises. By 1503, the Mufti of Oran was writing to contacts in Spain, instructing them to simulate conversion to Christianity while remaining true to their Muslim faith. Muslims complained that their books were burned. They were forced to curse the prophet. Those who died without extreme unction were left unburied on dung heaps, and even their names were taken and replaced with Christian names. Their social identity was threatened along with their religion. The Moriscos would remember for a long time, quote, the conversion of the natives of this kingdom was by force and against the capitulation, end quote. However, key differences separated the two groups. Jewish conversos were often urban, involved in commerce, and over generations, many genuinely converted to Christianity. Moriscos mainly stayed rural, kept their cultural identity, and openly resented forced conversion. Location also mattered. Morisco's proximity to North Africa caused security concerns that Jews never faced. Spanish authorities built coastal watchtowers and deployed garrisons, worried about coordination between African and Spanish Muslims. The outcome was an unstable compromise. After 1502, Moors remained nominally Christian, but Moorish in practice. The government refused to enforce bans on traditional dress and customs. The Andalusian clergy proved sadly wanting in genuine conversion efforts. Morescos lacked the will to convert, and the clergy lacked the resolve to convert them, leading to a deadlock. The impact on the traditional social order was significant. Spain had long been composed of Christians, Gentiles, and Jews, a diverse system that worked for centuries. Now, only not real but pretended unity was substituted. The Moresco issue worsened until Philip III finally expelled them in 1609. Archbishop Talavera's counterfactual haunts history. If the original terms had been kept, gradual assimilation might have occurred peacefully over generations. Granada's legacy reached well beyond Iberia. The decade-long campaign established direct continuities that influenced Spanish imperial power for 150 years. Personnel continuities were very noticeable. Granada veterans led Spanish forces throughout the early modern period. At Cerignola in 1503, they defeated French forces with tactics developed in Andalusian sieges. At Pavia in 1525, they carried out coordinated operations, night marches, engineering breaches, arquebus flanking fire, that captured the French king and solidified Spanish dominance. Granada veterans also conquered the Americas. Institutional persistence was equally significant. The Santa Hermandad, transformed by Isabel into a professional standing army, became the model for Spain's permanent military force. The capitanías evolved into tercio companies that dominated European battlefields until 1643. The Master of Artillery became a permanent staff position. Royal command centralization continued under Charles V and Philip II. The infrastructure supporting operations remained intact. State arsenals, permanent artillery units, professional engineers, and a systematic logistics system. Spain's 179 guns by 1495 represented a lasting military capability that the monarchy maintained and expanded. Most importantly, a professional military culture developed. The concept of veteranos, experienced soldiers serving in long-term campaigns, replaced feudal warriors' seasonal service. Technical expertise in gunnery, engineering, and fortification became valued specializations. Career military service became an option for ordinary soldiers. These continuities are at the heart of scholarly debate. Did Granada signify the peak of medieval warfare or the dawn of modern warfare? Historian John Edwards strongly emphasized continuity. Methods and materials used in the Granada War continued a tradition rather than representing significant innovation, he argues. Traditional weapons remained dominant, including lances, spears, crossbows, and halberds. Siege engines still existed alongside artillery, wooden towers, scaling ladders, trebuchets. The feudal levy system remained in place. Nobles supplied troops, and town militias provided infantry. Isabel and Fernando did not innovate, but made full use of existing practice. His evidence goes beyond weapons. Granada's border defenses weren't unusually dense. Border control practices stayed traditional. The suggested naval plan, which could have ended the war 5 years earlier, was rejected in favor of spontaneous operations. Throughout the 15th century, military strength overwhelmingly favored the Castilians. Success stemmed from a steady political will and organization, rather than technical advances. Edwards highlights how chroniclers credited victories to divine favor and moral strength instead of technology. This suggests that Granada's fall was primarily due to internal divisions and better organization, rather than a military revolution. Military historian Weston Cook and Isabel biographer Peggy Liss offer a different interpretation. Gunpowder, firepower, and artillery siege operations won the Granadan War, Cook argues, marking Granada as the birthplace of modern Spanish military power. Their quantitative evidence is persuasive. Artillery expanded from just a few pieces in 1482 to 179 guns by 1495. Quote, the most impressive artillery yet collected in Western Europe, end quote. Personnel became more professional. 4 master gunners in 1482 increased to 91 by 1485. 5 state foundries were established. The Santa Hermandad transformed from local militias into a force of 1,400 to 1,500 professional cavalry by 1489. The revolutionary impacts are well documented. Fortified towns that once could have held out a year now fell in a month, chronicler Bernaldez observed. The psychological warfare was just as important as physical destruction. At Elora, unprecedented firepower caused neighboring towns to surrender rather than engage in battle. Combined arms integration, artillery, infantry, and cavalry, coordinated in proto-tercio formations, enabled year-round campaigning by professional forces instead of seasonal operations by feudal levies. The main point is not whether individual elements existed before, but their organized integration and professionalization. All elements had precedence, one historian admits, but scale and systemization represented a qualitative change. The truth probably lies somewhere between these positions. Granada was neither purely a continuation nor a radical revolution, but a transitional crucible where existing elements were melded into a coherent system. What is agreed? Artillery played a vital role. Internal Muslim divisions made conquest easier. Organizational sophistication was essential. The main disagreement centers on interpretation. Edwards' primary argument is that many innovations had precedence. Artillery existed before Granada. Professional troops had been used earlier. Royal centralization had been attempted before. Traditional elements remained important. Cavalry charges were celebrated. Individual combat skills were necessary. And divine providence was invoked. But the innovation thesis also makes a strong case by emphasizing direct institutional, personnel, and doctrinal links to 16th century dominance. When Pavia commanders used Granada developed tactics 40 years later, they showed a real transformation. The resolution stems from studying Granada as a testing ground. The decade-long campaign cultivated professional culture, improved methods, and established lasting institutions. Artillery allowed for the systematic reduction of fortresses, but required an organizational change to be deployed effectively. Isabel's role deserves special emphasis. Her logistics and strategic guidance were as crucial as Fernando's field command. Her presence at key moments prevented collapse. Her transformation of the Santa Hermandad led to Spain's first standing army. Her financial innovations enabled unprecedented sustained operations. The military revolution might not have begun at Granada, but Spain's military revolution definitely did. On January 6th, 1492, Isabel and Fernando entered Granada amid celebrations across Christian Europe. However, that victory masked a complex reality of innovation, calculation, and betrayal. Granada's legacy proved twofold. Militarily, it established Spanish power that dominated European battlegrounds for more than a century. Commanders trained in these mountain sieges conquered Italy, defeated France, and built American empires. Culturally, Granada ended convivencia, centuries of Christian Muslim Jewish coexistence, and established the religion of state. The parallel persecution of Jews and Muslims within a decade reflected an ideology of religious uniformity that would shape Spanish identity for centuries. The scholarly debate shows how we understand historical change. Was transformation a slow evolution or a sudden break? Did technology cause change or just support organizational shifts? Granada offers no easy answers. It was a test where decade-long warfare, shaped by both imperial military strength and strict religious conformity. Through those trials, Spain created the power and the tragedy that influenced the early modern world. In the next episode, we will look at the final years of the Catholic monarchs and the question of succession. As always, maps and other supporting resources for all episodes are listed in the episode description. In the meantime, for more historical content, please visit the I Take History with My Coffee blog at itakehistory.com. Become a free or paid subscriber on Substack and get related historical content delivered to your inbox. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Feedback and comments are welcome at itakehistory@gmail.com, or you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. You can also help support this podcast by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/itakehistory. If you know anyone else who would enjoy this podcast, please let them know. And thanks for listening.